You're watching Caught for Two, broadcasting live from Champaign, Illinois, Thursday night, 10 p.m. Central, January 26, 2023. A bit of a rough start getting started here, and YouTube is complaining that it's not receiving enough data. Hopefully you can hear me okay. In fact, let me just quickly check on the chat to see if the audio and video is coming through okay. This will be about an hour-long session. I'm hoping that it's just YouTube doing its normal complaining and it actually is coming through okay. All right, so we're going to talk for about an hour here. We're going to do our normal thing. I'll look at some stats for the channel and then we'll answer some question and answer stuff, and we're going to sort of get better at this as we go. Before we start, a little bit of catching up. If anyone's been up to anything interesting, I saw a couple of movies. I finally did finish watching Pale Blue Eye with Christian Bale. I didn't love it. It was okay. Christian Bale is always great. The Edgar Allan Poe gimmick did not work for me. That's a very weird actor. So anyway, it was okay. Now, a movie I did see, though, yesterday was Shin Ultraman. And if you've not seen Shin Godzilla, I would recommend it. It's one of my favorite movies of the last few years. And Shin Ultraman was a little stranger, didn't exactly hit the same kind of home run, but I do love that director and I love what he's doing with those movies. Anyone else up to anything interesting? I've got some questions here. We're going to try to load it up on this software, and I've got some stuff to show you on the laptop. Okay, let's just get started then. First of all, those of you who are observant might notice the table looks a little different. There's a new mat on the table. What do you notice about it? What is it a map of? A mat. It's a table mat, but it's also a map. What do you see? Here's the top-down view. Does it look familiar? That's right. It's a custom mat of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective mat. That's right. So 4 foot by 3 foot. I got it not to play on. I do think, let's see if we can bring it up here. Here's a little picture of it on the table. Not to play on. I think the mat that I normally use to play on, the black mat, which is just got a subtle pattern on it, is better for playing, less distracting. This is a little distracting. But I normally have a little cardboard cover on the table as a protector when I'm not playing a game, and now this is what I'll use for that. So I'll have a nice little dust protector on it, and this will be just the mat I use if I'm sitting here reading or programming. All right, so let's talk about what's new on the channel since the last channel update live Q&A, which was about 3 months ago. The big thing you might have noticed is that Greg and I have patched up our friendship and are refilming. We did reviews and playthroughs of 2 new pandemic spin-offs, Wrath of the Lich King and Star Wars Clone Wars, which were surprisingly good. If you haven't seen our quick before you buy it review for those, Wrath of the Lich King I could I could pass on. But the Clone Wars was surprisingly good and surprisingly interesting from a game design perspective. We also reviewed The Animals of Baker Street, which is a game detective type game by Dave Neal, who did the Baker Street Irregulars, aimed at young adults, 10 or older. We liked that quite a bit. That's definitely, if you've got a kid in that age range who you think might be ready to introduce to mystery games, that's a great choice. We also reviewed Decorum, which was a real surprise for me because my views on that changed. I'll talk a little bit about that later in this video. By the way, I should say, if you've got questions, you can ask them here. I took a couple questions earlier from the Board Game Geek Guild for this channel, but if you've got questions, feel free to ask them anytime during this stream. I'll plug that now while I'm here. There is a facility on Board Game Geek where people can create guilds, which are basically just their own little private forum sections, and there is a guild for this channel. You'll find a link to that in the About page of this YouTube channel, as well as a link to the Discord where I just hang out 24 hours a day and just keep open in the background. I'm happy to talk to people there. Okay, what else did we do? We played and reviewed Rear Window. That's right. Greg and I played and reviewed Rear Window, which was a huge, a surprise, wonderful surprise for me because I've been looking for a game like that for a while. And I keep trying these games like Mysterium Park and everything, hoping to find one that works, and they never do. But Rear Window does seem to work, and I would definitely recommend that. What else did we do? We did a couple things. Greg had an idea to do a silly little Kickstarter, not Kickstarter. We did a Kickstarter look at Marvel United, which I think is a hard pass for me, this new Marvel United multiverse stuff. But we did that, and we did a little funny little Gloomhaven box, which is funny, but it really does go to show you that you got to be careful with those Kickstarters. I backed Frosthaven from all the hype and just seemed great. I love the legacy stuff, but now it just brings me dread to look at that box. Like, it's never going to get opened, never going to get played. All right. And then solo, the big game we played was the Queen's Park Affair, which we played for about, took us about 47 hours in total to play it over 7 sessions or so, and then talked about it for like an hour and a half afterwards. And then I finally did review last week, did record a before you buy it, not a before you buy it. I recorded an 80-minute long discussion of the Queen's Park Affair, but spoiler-free. Somehow I managed to talk for 80 minutes spoiler-free. I don't know how useful that is, but I did record that. And then just looking at the list of stuff that was done since the last update, we did play Postmortem London Gothic, which was very highly anticipated by us. We played it. We recorded 3 streams of it. 3 sessions, I think, of it. No, maybe 2 sessions. But it was a long playthrough. It was like 15 hours, and we found a lot of bugs, and they actually recalled it. And it'll be re-released sometime soon in the next couple months. They'll re-release it. They're going to send everyone who played it before they fixed the problems, they're going to send it back. I've heard from the author of that, who I won't talk about, but if you watch my review of the Postmortem LA trilogy, you'll see who the author is. They've changed quite a bit. I don't think enough for us to replay it, but maybe enough for me to do a special video where I compare what got fixed with our old version. Those old videos were taken down by request of the Mysterious Package Company because they didn't want people to get the wrong idea of the game since it was being recalled. Eventually, those will go back up, and we'll be able to see how the new version compares. The other thing we did was we finished the 2 play-by-mail, murders-by-mail game, the LA one and the Sherlock Holmes one, and we started the 3rd and final one made by this company, called The Blinded Birder, which is so far, so I thought was going to be the least interesting. That's why I didn't order originally, and it's turned out so far to be the most compelling. We'll be playing the next episode of that on Sunday at 3 p.m. They last for about an hour, those sessions. I'd love to do them every week, but the mail doesn't seem to get here reliably in a week, so sometimes we have to skip weeks. What else? We played File on Fenton and Farr. We went back and did another 1937 crime dossier. Those are very special. I had a great time playing that. We played through a bunch of fan-made Sherlock Holmes Consulting detective fan-made scenarios, and we're playing another one tomorrow night starting at 11. That's The Curse by Martinez Conradi. He's written some great cases. I don't know how he managed to write this new case in the intervening time since we played the last one, but we'll be playing that tomorrow. If you want to join us for that, that'll, could take us all night tomorrow. And we played a couple new games by new companies doing these document dump cold case style games, Cryptic Killers, which was surprisingly good, that we'll probably play another one soon, and some FPI Mysteries, which is a company that's got one more that we don't know anything about, but it was reasonably good, a little different. And then I posted a video updating some of the gadgets I use for recording and live streaming. New tripod heads. Just if you're interested in starting a YouTube channel for some reason, you might want to check that out. And I'm going to post at some point a discussion of all the software and extensions and plugins I use. They don't get watched, those videos, but I do them anyway. All right, let's catch up on the channel before we go to our next section. Wizardo says more paleo. Well, paleo is a trick. Well, okay. There is going to be more paleo because we have the expansion New Beginnings, and we are going to play that. So we will play that and review it, and maybe record a playthrough of the final scenario in the base box, which we've played offline but lost. All right, what else? Before we get to questions and answers, let's take a look at statistics for the channel, just because it would be nice if all channels gave us a little bit of some statistics. So let's see what we can get you here. Let's see if you can see this okay. All right, here we go. So this is over the last 90 days since the last live Q&A. You can see here's the last 48 hours. This is about as low as we get. So this is what happens. Sometimes YouTube gets tricked. When I do like a lot of live streaming, the way I imagine it is that YouTube gets tricked into thinking, well, he's doing all this, he's live streaming 7 hours a day for 5 days in a row. It must be something someone wants to watch. And so sometimes YouTube will start shoving that down people's throats, and this will go up to 2,000. But this is where it normally lulls back into if I just put up 1 or 2 videos a week. So according to YouTube, however, 48,000 views in the last 90 days, 50% more than usual, okay. 10,000 watched hours, whatever that means, 80% more than the previous 90 days. Subscribers, 287. It says 74% more than the previous 90 days. I'm not sure I really understand that, because the subscribers, like if you look at the live count of subscribers, it just looks like a straight line no matter what time period. Like here's the lifetime of the channel. Here's the subscribers. They just get added 2 per day. That's about it. It's just a straight line. There's no momentum. There's no exponential growth. It's just a slow, steady increase of a couple people per day. And every time I post a video like filming lessons or gadgets or anything that's out of the, if I post a video on some new OBS plugin I've written or my scales, you can see the subscribers drop down a bunch and then it just goes back. It is interesting, I think. We can look at the audience. Maybe there's something interesting there. So channels your audience watches, everything here you might expect. Where your viewers are on YouTube. So 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I don't know. These are people not watching live streams, but watching the recorded videos. That's normal. Here we go. 46% from the US, 8% from the UK, 4% Canada, Germany, Australia. Germany's the big board game country. All right, let's see. Let's go back. Here we go. Can you see that? Female 25.6%, male 74%, unspecified 0. That's not bad. I think we could get that up a little bit. Here's our age breakdown. This is probably just generic board game demographics, although you would expect that this channel would skew a little older, which I guess it does. What else? Revenue. There's your 0 revenue. Research is not very useful. Content, I don't know what this shows. Oh, here we go. Views from the last 90 days. 30,000 from videos. 17,000 from live streams. And then published 60 live stream videos and 60 live stream sessions and 17 videos. How viewers find you. External, that's going to be from Board Game Geek. Don't know what any of this, how this is relevant. Okay, so there you go. A little look at the stats for what it's worth. Okay, we've done that. Let's go back and catch up on the chat here. Let's see if this thing works. Let me see if I can switch over to this for a second. Put these up as I do it. Okay. So Wizardo says, please do more paleo. I've already said we're going to play the expansion soon. Will you ever play Starstruck by Hunt a Killer? I have to say that the Hunt a Killer games are not my favorites. They're just skewed a little differently from my taste. They're heavy on they're expensive, they're heavy on the props, and they're heavy on the busy work. And the other stuff, just my experience from playing Blair Witch, which we played over Halloween, just not, it's not that they're bad, they're just not my favorite. I'm much more a fan of Deadbolt Mystery Society, which leads us to our next question. I will play more Hunt a Killer, but it's not, I'm not itching to play it. Stacy says, will you be playing the Deadbolt Mystery Society Copycat series? Well, I have stacks now of Deadbolt Mystery Society games. I buy them now when they come on sale. As soon as they're under 20 bucks, I buy them. I've got a stack of several dozen now. And we will be playing them. In fact, we'll play one next week, and I'll start reviewing them in batches as we play them. I don't think we're going to play Copycat yet. I was thinking that the next one we would play next week would be either Dark and Stormy Night or The Last Resort. You guys can choose which one you want me to play, or you want to play with me next week. They were both voted as top Deadbolt Mystery Society games by players over the last couple years. In fact, well, no, let me save that for later. Okay, so we will get to it. If people want to play that sooner than later, we can do that. Let me go, let's see. Would you consider doing any more ranking videos? Yeah, Greg wants to refilm our top 10s and not make them 3 hours long. So we'll probably soon redo our top 10 co-ops and top 10 competitive games and top 10 party games I did. We'll probably redo those and try to make them shorter. And my top 10 cooperative games has changed a little bit. Looking back at that list, there are there's one or two in there. You know, the way these top 10 lists work when people do them is that the games you played most recently get lots of extra little juice because they're fresh in your mind. And there's one in particular that snuck onto that list that should not have snuck on, and I'll be getting rid of that and replacing it. And one of those has moved right up to the number 1 spot or number 2 spot based on my experience playing these games on the channel, but you'll have to wait for that. Would you elaborate on how you reconciled with Greg? We're happy to see him back. Yes, I will. I am going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. When I get to some of these other questions that were submitted in advance. Okay, let's go to some of these. I like these. Let me get rid of this. So occasionally you'll watch, like if you watch Tom Vassell do his live question and answer, or Paul Grogan from Gaming Rules, who's very good at it. There are a couple people who are like, they are real board game experts. And they'll get questions like, what's the best game you played, or can you recommend this? I'm not so good at that. I'm almost board game adjacent at this point. Like my interests are very narrow. I used to follow the game design aspects of new games being published a lot more because I do have a wider interest in game design issues of new board games, although less a desire to play them. But even now I'm sort of drifting away, and most of my interests are in these mystery games and some of the serious cooperative games. So I don't feel that qualified to talk about some of this stuff, but what I am keenly interested in is the insanity of filming stuff for YouTube and board game YouTube content. So I do like some of these questions about that, about the psychology of it. So I've got a couple of them here that were submitted, and we'll try to go through them here. A bunch from George Costanza. George Costanza says, what inspired you to create this channel? And, well, you know, if you've listened to me before, that I don't have a really good answer to that. A lot of things get done by me, programming projects or whatever, just get done because they sort of burrow in. And then if they stay there for a while, I just go do it. And I say, we'll figure out why later. But I have always loved filming and documenting stuff. So I had a camera in high school and college, and I would just film large blocks of time. Just put a camera on the wall and film 5 or 6 hours of just life. And there's something very satisfying about that to me. I hypothesized at one point that it's because I don't have a good visual memory. There's a name for when you can't recall people's faces visually, and I have that. It's not prosopagnosia, it's something different. I've forgotten the name now. I talked about it once before. But there's something very enjoyable at having things documented. And I think there's got to be anyone who's got a YouTube channel, they've got some narcissism problem where it's not that you think people will benefit from what you have to say. It's that for some reason, there's some enjoyment of like getting stuff on the record. And I think part of it is just you have these conversations and then they're gone into the wind. They're gone. And there's something comforting about having them on record. They're like in your closet on your, in the box, okay, that memory is safe. That thing is safe. And it's like, I do the same thing with taking notes. I have a big stack of index cards. And if I get an idea for a project, or I'll write it down and file it away. And I don't ever have to go back to it, but there's some comfort in knowing that it's there. It won't get forgotten. If you ever needed to remember it, you could find it. Next question. What is it about cooperative games and mystery games draw you to them? I think part of it, this gets back a little bit to the narcissism stuff. Like, I don't consider myself a narcissist, but I'm not a social person. I don't really enjoy talking that much to people in general, but I do like talking about things. And like if I would give a lecture at school or whatever, there's something very enjoyable about just sort of having a talking, presenting ideas. And I think the cooperative games scratch that itch because you're not just playing the game, you're talking with someone. Those are the kinds of cooperative games I like. The games where you're really working out a plan, talking about it, presenting your ideas, considering someone's ideas. And I like the process of sort of thinking about something, trying to work through something sort of verbally, like actually on the fly, working it through. And the mystery games are like that too. We try to solve something on the fly and we're sort of talking through it, talking through the problem and solving it on the fly. There's something very enjoyable about that. And I don't like, competition makes me uncomfortable. Like competitive board games, I'll play them. And especially if they're shorter, but I feel bad when I win and I feel bad when I lose. So it's a lose-lose for me. I will play competitive games occasionally, but there's a real risk that I'll feel guilty if I win or feel sort of like uncomfortable that I've lost, sort of like a mental status, hierarchy of status doesn't feel right. Okay, next question here. This gets back to the question about how did Greg and I reconcile, how to avoid purgatory and mend friendships. Okay, so if you don't know what the purgatory reference is, that's what I've started to put at the end of some of these videos, and that was the way I described. It actually was a more complicated thing than you guys saw with Greg, because Greg and I's friendship got destroyed, and then other friends got drawn into this, and they had issues. And so it was like the way I described it is that we're all going to be in purgatory for years for what we've done. So how did it get mended? How do you avoid purgatory? I don't have great advice for how to avoid purgatory with your friends. I think mostly time solves it on its own. I think there's a lesson about emotion and facts. Like, it's not the facts. In retrospect, when you look back through the rear window, the things that you're upset about, the things that go wrong, are of very minor importance. But emotions run hot and you get your feelings hurt. Everyone gets their feelings hurt and becomes very sensitive, where the smallest thing will throw you off. And my experience has been that if you can have the discipline to not say anything that's hard to walk back and just sort of give yourself some distance, and maybe watch a movie where, friends are reconciling. I remember there was a Mr. Rogers movie recently, just a movie that makes you realize there are more important things, puts things in perspective. And then hopefully that the time will wear away those raw emotions to the point where you can say, hey, look, I was hurt, you were hurt. Let's sort of, have a talk about it, but the emotional valence of everything is gone, and that makes all the difference. And then you have to want to reconcile. It's a little bit like a family where you're like, well, would I have been friends with this person if we weren't in a family? Maybe not, but we're in a family. We're just going to accept it as given and work within those boundaries. I don't know. If someone else has some advice on it, let me know. Okay, next question. I should probably mix some of these up, but I'm just going to walk down through these. What is your favorite type of tabletop game? All right, so we talked about this. For anyone who doesn't know, my favorite board game experiences ever are the pandemic legacy games. And to me, that's the best of all worlds. The cooperative Pandemic, which is my favorite cooperative game of all time, and then mixed with this legacy story that develops. I just thought that those were real home runs. And we'll talk a little bit about new games coming out that's related to that. But the other sort of type of game that has a spot in my heart are the party games. And I am just fascinated, as someone who's not very social, I am fascinated and feel very drawn to this sort of structured social interaction, especially the party games, which are sort of a half socializing, half you're just hanging out, and half you're playing these games, often which involve making fun of someone or laughing at someone. So I'm always looking for party games. The last two party games that we played really worked well were Green Team Wins and Blank Slate, which I think is almost the same. Actually, Blank Slate worked better for my groups, but both of those games are amazing. And of course, Codenames and all those great games. Okay. What drew you to the hobby? Originally, how was your relationship? I sort of addressed that before, that I've come much more. I don't play co-op competitive games. I used to have a game group locally. I don't do that so much more. I would, but I'm a little burned out from stuff now. Okay, there's that. Let's see. What gaming table do you use currently? Any recommendations? Okay, so I did want to point out here that the table you see me playing on, of course, is, oops, what did it? Not that one. That one. The table you see me playing on, and you can see on the other things, was built by me, this tabletop, for this filming. But I did make a video on my series here. One of the first questions you're going to have to ask yourself is filming, which is 5.5 hours long, on talking all different things. There's a section here in episode 2 where I talk about building this table. I did it, and how I did it, and the simple thing that I did with these rails. The one thing I would do different, I was going to do it again. You can watch these videos, of course. Is that little cut under the table, just like that, which is here. Oops, let me take this off. This cut under this table was cut so that a 3x4 standard size would lay inside this groove, which works great, but it's just high enough for one mat. And if I did it again, I would leave myself a 1/2 inch here. You can watch that video if you want to try to make your own table. If you're interested in that kind of thing, Board Game Geek has a whole giant DIY thread of people making tables. It's really quite fun to see what people have done. I would recommend it if you're so inclined. For those of you considering buying a board game table, here's what I would say. You have to spend a lot of money to buy a board game table that's going to make you happy, like $1,000, $2,000. If you don't want to spend that much money, you probably shouldn't try to buy a cheap knockoff. Check out that, I don't mean a cheap knockoff, but I think the pleasure of the table is a nice, sturdy table with leaves you can put on top. That's the main appeal of buying a proper board game table, is that you can leave games set up and then use it as your dining table by putting the leaves on top. And there are some fancy ones out there, but you're going to have to spend $1,000, $2,000, or make your own as a fun project. But I would say this, if you don't have $2,000 to just extra money to buy a board game table, if you buy yourself a nice big neoprene mat, 4 foot by 3 foot, a nice big one, you're going to get, in my opinion, 80% of the benefits of having a game table. It's a big improvement to be able to play games on a nice mat. You can pick up pieces a lot easier. Card games are much more enjoyable to play. It's just a nicer surface, and you can get one of those for 40, 50 bucks. So start with that. And then maybe you can consider upgrading to a table. Okay, let's do a couple more questions here. What are some of the most frustrating elements of having a YouTube channel? What did I write about that? Well, let's talk about this. This is some interesting psychology here. First of all, let me talk a little bit about the difficulty of collaborating with someone. There are a couple of channels where there are people doing YouTube board game videos together, although I guess this is not really a board game specific thing. Mostly it's couples. There are a couple of groups of friends that do it. I've posted some links to one of the board game rundown is the one where it looks like they're friends having a good time, but there are a couple more. Greg and I have found it very difficult to collaborate on it. And I think, it has to do with personalities clashing, but it's probably true that anyone has got something that they want to do strongly enough that they go to all the trouble to set up a YouTube channel and do all that, probably you have some specific ideas of how things are you want to be done. Probably works a little bit better if you're in a couple where one person is the driving force and the other person's sort of along for the ride. You see that a lot in couples on YouTube doing board game content, in both male or female being the person who's sort of the driving force behind it. And sometimes that works, sometimes that feels a little off. But when you get two people who've got very particular ideas, and Greg has got some we both have idiosyncrasies, but Greg has some real idiosyncrasies, if I may say so, about how things should be done, and things bother him if they're not done certain ways. And that has proved very difficult. In fact, I will say, it's interesting. Let me talk for a minute about this because it's fresh in my mind and it's an interesting sort of example of how difficult these things are. So Greg and I got back together after a year of not being friends, not hanging out, not filming, and we had a very good time. We laughed. We always laugh a lot when we talk, and we went on a nice walk. We talked about everything, talked about ideas. We played and recorded the Star Wars, the pandemic spinoffs. Then we did a video, then we played Animals of Baker Street. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that experience. So to give you a little bit of view behind the scenes about psychology and frustration. So we played Animals of Baker Street. And we both liked it a lot. And we're still getting the feel for how to do these reviews. In fact, especially the quick before you buy it reviews, when we're trying to make a sort of shorter video review. My approach is that when we do a long review, a long discussion, we just talk for an hour and a half the way we would talk normally, and I won't edit that, I won't cut anything out. But when we try to do these shorter reviews, let me just take this off the screen. When we try to do these shorter reviews, we're trying to learn to be a little more concise. So we planned out a little bit of the ideas we want to talk about, and we recorded our review for the Animals of Baker Street, which is up. You can watch it. And we recorded about 25 minutes worth. And our approach for these quick before you buy it reviews is to try to get them down to 10 minutes. This was actually Greg's idea, that we would have this short video that would be before you buy a game, and then we can have our long discussions, which is an idea I love. I love the idea of having the short, super short review, and then having the long discussion, which could be for even after you buy it. So we recorded, anyway, we recorded 25 minutes and I edited it down. And I edited it down to 15 minutes. And it was quite a bit of work to edit those videos. It's work editing the videos down. There's lots of little inserts of when we mention a game, I try to put it up. And it's not so easy to cut down a video because what happens is you've got, depending on the way you talk, and both Greg and I talk sort of extemporaneously, and it means that it's hard to cut out a section because there's sort of a segue into it. You're catching someone in the middle of a sentence. Sometimes you have to leave in a bunch that you don't want to leave in because it flows into something you do want to leave in, and vice versa. So I cut this video down to 15 minutes, which was longer than I wanted, and probably longer than it had to be to convey the point. And I uploaded it for rendering. You know, it takes several hours to edit those videos down. And I sent it to Greg, and Greg felt very good about the conversation we had on tape about it. And when I sent him the video, he was upset. And he was upset that I had cut out something he had said in the video. And we could both see we were sort of teetering on the edge of purgatory. Like there was already some tension there about it. And it was a tricky moment because, well, first of all, my solution was whatever you want, I'll put it back. I don't care. This is not like we don't get judged and awarded based on the length of these videos. There's no benefit accrues to us from having a good, concise video, whether it gets more views or not. None of that has any real impact. So I was like, I'll put whatever you want back in. But it was a bit of a logistic hassle, and you wouldn't want to have to do that going forward every time. It can't be that every time we edit a video, it gets approved and edits get made after the fact suggestions. But we just talked about it, and it was an interesting thing because you could see there was some psychology of we were both producing this video, and Greg didn't want this important thing that he had said not to be in there. That made him feel bad. We didn't have a longer video of it, so we're still trying to figure that out. But then it was also a little bit, there was some psychology going on for me because here was a game that I found, that I bought, that's got Dave Neal as the author. I've talked to Dave Neal. I was sort of happy that I liked it. It was sort of in my wheelhouse of these detective games, so there was a little bit of sort of ownership. I do occasionally get a kind of ownership thing on games or things. Like, I'm happy to play either role. I can take the lead on a project or be a helper on the project, but there's certain things where I walk into it thinking that I have a certain role. Anyway, it was awkward. We solved it, but you can see that these things are not easy when you have people with egos. So that's you got a long discussion of Animals of Baker Street, but I thought it might, if you're not interested in this stuff, that's fine. You don't have to watch this, but if you're here, I might as well give you as much insight into the behind the scenes thing if you're considering making a channel. Okay, so my mother is in the channel. Let's see what my mother asks. Does your presentation change based on the number of people that are watching? Would you change things if you noticed no one was watching? No. I don't think it matters for me if anyone is watching. I started doing the solo mysteries when no one was watching. I played a bunch of Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective when no one was watching. I don't think it really makes that much of a difference. I'm mostly talking to myself. The only difference for me is it's more enjoyable when there's some people giving me a little bit of feedback and helping me with some of these mystery games. But I don't think it really makes a difference. For me, that's part of what I enjoy about this process the most. This kind of feels like alone time, even though someone may watch it and I'm talking to some people in the channel. For me, whatever the whatever the complicated nature of the social interaction, extroverts, introverts in the brain, I've talked about my theory is that it's going to turn out that most of the YouTube people are introverts. And this is sort of the exception to the rule. It's sort of a social interaction without the danger of having actual entities in your room. Okay, let's see. What else have we got? What are the most satisfying things about the channel? That was the opposite of that one. Did I finish the frustration? I didn't completely finish the frustration. I will say that the other part of the frustration that I know, let's go back to this one for a second. It's absolutely true that you sort of can't help yourself looking at the analytics, seeing that here's the 5-hour video course that took me a month to put together, and no one's watching it. No one cares. And I do think there's always that little battle with yourself that you're doing regarding the fact that you're making videos and so few people are watching them. It's a... Well, look, you can see there's some channels that have really, their goal is to get viewers, make this their career. And, you know, I've got mixed feelings about that. I admire their dedication and their focus. This channel is not that for me. So in some sense, it really doesn't matter to me at all. But you can't help but get a little bit of tinge of those occasional feelings of like, why aren't more people watching it? And, you know, it gets back to that little bit of ego. Sometimes I watch a video that I've done, like if I write an article, I'll reread it several times. So there's obviously some sort of, you know, narcissistic bent there where I might enjoy my own writing. And occasionally I'll watch a video, not watch it, but listen to it or something. And I'll be like, hey, that's not bad. Like my memory of it will be, that was terrible. And then I'll rewatch it. Like I did the 80-minute review of Queen's Park, and I'll say, hey, that's pretty good. That's interesting. Why aren't more people watching that? But then I'll watch a video and I'll say, that is just unbearable. I don't know how anyone can bear to watch that. So I kind of have mixed feelings. On any given day, I'll come down on either side of that. But I do think if one of the real issues, one of the real frustrating or negative parts is worrying about, is this time well spent? You know, I mean, my academic interest in AI, I do often think, should I really be spending 20 hours a week or 10 hours a week live streaming, playing a mystery game, when I could be doing research or writing a book that might be of more use to the world? So, okay, anyway, there's that. But that would hold whether you're playing the game or streaming it. It's just a matter of, do you need time off for hobby, and if it's enjoyable. And this does sort of, this is a little bit like meditation. All right, so let's talk about this, and I'll catch up on the chat channel in a second. So the most satisfying things, the biggest surprise for me is how much of a source of sort of calm enjoyment the channel is. Mostly for the live streams. The live streams are the place that was the biggest surprise, because on one hand, you're sort of like I am here, you're sort of just, you're standing in front of a camera talking. You wouldn't think that would be relaxing. It's not sort of relaxing in the moment, but I think it's probably true. It's almost certainly true that the people who do these YouTube live streams are really getting something out of the process. Leaving aside why, if they're doing it for other reasons, like they want to make money on it or whatever. But there's obviously something to it. And I really do think like the term meditation is overly narrow. And you think of meditation as sort of clearing your mind of thought. And I think in a way, that's what happens when you do these live streams. You sort of go on automatic. Your sort of conscious mind gives up its role as a censor because you don't have time to censor what you're saying. And because of that, you sort of go on automatic. And by the time you're done, it sort of has that similar kind of effect, I think. And so this is like my alone time, and I find it very enjoyable, comforting, satisfying, relaxing. The other thing that the channel has surprisingly given me the opportunity to do is code for OBS, code extensions for the live streaming software, code extensions for Adobe Premiere, and then spend a lot of time just learning about the cameras and the different gadgets used. There's something very enjoyable about working on that stuff and learning to use the technology better. I enjoy that process. All right. Let's get to a couple more questions in the channel, and then I'll jump to something else here. Okay, let's see. Would people participating in your streams via Zoom ruin that feeling of alone time? Yeah, I don't think, I do not like talking on the phone. I do not like talking on Zoom. It would totally change the experience for me if I had to actually converse live with someone via Zoom, like talking on the telephone. I couldn't do it. It has to be this sort of asynchronous interaction. I do really enjoy having the interaction with the channel in an asynchronous fashion, but I wouldn't want to do it via Zoom. Okay, detective games always struck me as using your whole brain in a way, but a few games do good mental taxation. Yes, absolutely. There's something very, you fully get into that world and you forget everything else. That's one of the reasons all of us love board games, is you sort of enter a little altered state, like watching a movie where you're in a different world and you're not thinking about your life and the regular world. You're in this world. And it's true that the detective games call on a different part of your brain than a Euro game would. All right, let's see. John says, who's to say the 10 hours a week streaming detective game isn't a necessary ingredient to your later in life AI magnum opus? Okay, I don't know about that, but it's still a useful, it's obviously serving a role. Okay, now let's talk some questions that Brian from Game Brigade asked. Brian says, what games are you most interested in playing this year? Okay, so I did make a list here of a couple games that I'm interested in playing that are coming out. Seventh Citadel, which is the follow-up to The Seventh Continent, which is an amazing game. You can watch some long 12-hour stream on this channel of Greg and I playing it. There's no other game that I've played that has memories of stories from Seventh Continent that I still remember. Incredible story moments from playing that game. It is a hard game to get to the table, but I'm fascinated to see what they do with Seventh Citadel, the follow-up, and that should be coming out this year, I believe. The other one on my list is Daybreak, which is Matt Leacock's new cooperative game, Matt Leacock from Pandemic. And I have sort of a running question in the back of my mind, like, for me, Pandemic Legacy was the best game ever made. That was Leacock and Daviau, Rob Daviau, Matt Leacock and Rob Daviau. But I really think Matt Leacock is the genius, because Rob Daviau, when left on his own, is much more iffy. So I'm very curious. Daybreak has gotten a lot of hype. It's sort of an environmentalist, global warming game that's really leaning on the educational stuff. So I'm very curious to see how it holds up. That'll be coming out this year. Another one is Mists of Carcassonne, Mists over Carcassonne. It's the cooperative version of Carcassonne. I'm not a big fan of Carcassonne or tile laying, but there's something about this one has me very curious about it. Someone, I think the Liege of Games guy made a video saying it was one of his favorite games. I am very curious about it. I think it might be like a campaign ramped up, which I'm a sucker for, so I am very curious about that. And then 2 more games. One called The Nevernight City, Shanghai the Nevernight City, and another called The Dark Quarter. And both of these are games. The Dark Quarter is Lucky Duck, the makers of Chronicles of Crime, and it looks like an app-driven detective game set in New Orleans in the 80s or something. It looks quite interesting. It looks like it's got some strategic elements, but also app-driven story, detective cases, and a scenario editor, much like Chronicles of Crime has, so people can make fan cases. It looks quite interesting. That'll certainly come out. I think it's coming out this year, but there's no doubt about that. And then the other one, the Shanghai Nevernight City, has some very beautiful detective game art, but they announced it as a Kickstarter, then they pulled it back and said they weren't sure if they were going to make an app for it. So that one's a little bit more in limbo. But I do find myself really craving more detective style games, and we haven't seen that many of them in the last year or two. So I really am hoping we'll get some more of them. And then I've got a couple of sort of not new games, but games that I am hoping to play more of. Deadbolt Mystery Society, which I sort of discovered this year, are much higher quality than I expected. There are a lot of them. I do hope to play through more of those. I think a bunch more fan cases for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. Then there are a couple games that I have that for some reason I'm looking forward to playing. Escape the Dark Castle and Dark Sector. I love the art style of that. I do want to try those. Those are older games, but I do want to get to them. The latest Eon's End Legacy of Gravehold that I kickstarted. I'm not sure exactly why I want to play that. I didn't like playing Eon's End non-legacy, but the last legacy, the Eon's End Legacy game that came out a couple years ago, I really enjoyed that process. And then, let's see, so that's about it. One game I'm really curious to see the reviews of, and they're starting to come out, is Artisans of the Splendent Veil. This is Nikki Vallen's latest project, big, heavy narrative project. And I played through it on the channel and reviewed Legacy of Dragonholt, which was a very ambitious game that I didn't really like that much. It was too slow and I didn't love it. But I did love that it had this sort of political, opinionated, cultural commentary in it. And I'm very curious to see if there's anything in Artisans of Splendent Veil similar, and just see what happens with that, what the reviews are. I'm a little doubtful about the combat mechanic in it slowing things down, but I am curious to watch the reviews of that. All right, let's catch up on the channel. We don't have too much time here. We should probably speed things up. Let's see. Duke of Zil says, many mystery games have time constraints that you often prefer to ignore. Should there be more mystery games that are focused on the mystery and story? I mean, that's what we tend to focus on here. It's true, I don't love the time constraint games. We do have the Heist, the Black Hawk game by Adventure, that's real time, and I am very curious to look at. Robert says, do you think having a problem to solve when you code software is a plus or minus to you when you problem solve mysteries on this channel? I think maybe the closest time when that kind of question comes up is when you can't tell whether something is solvable. That does bother me. I have a very high threshold for investing time in something if I believe that there's a solution at the end. If you tell me here's a cipher, you will be able to figure it out. I could devote 2 days to it and work on it till I solve it. But if you tell me that here's a cipher, but maybe it's not solvable, then I really don't want to spend too much time on it. I like that you do the deep dive. a channel that I've recommended in the past, which does, there are a couple channels that do these similar deep dives in games, and the Dungeon Dive is a channel I would highly recommend if you want to look at someone really doing some deep dives. There are some great channels that go into some of these old games and really take a long look and offer some historical perspective on them, and those are the kinds of channels that I tend to like. Are the days of mystery games, including 10 cases in a box, gone? I think they are gone. I think it's what you're talking about now are those Space Cowboys box. Like Space Cowboys reprinted Queen's Park, and they put the Queen's Park Affair and Mansion Murders in one, and Baker Street Irregulars, which is pretty recent, just in 4 years or so, had 10 cases. Those feel overly generous now, especially on Kickstarter. You look at some of this stuff, those games are selling for hundreds of dollars. It's hard to get away with. It's hard to imagine games now with 10 Sherlock Holmes consulting detective cases in them. That just feel like we're not going to get such generous gifts, but that's okay. Okay. Brian says, which game was your favorite in 2022? So I'm just going to list rifle off a couple from the channel that were some of my favorite. I loved File on Rufus Ray that we played very recently, that 1937 dossier. I loved the Postmortem LA series that we played in 2022. I was hugely pleasantly surprised by Deadbolt Mystery Society boxes. I'm going to start reviewing those in batches because there are some real gems there. Another giant surprise to me was how good the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective fan cases are. I hope we can do much more playthroughs of those coming up. And maybe we can help try to curate a top 10 fan cases for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective. We'll have to play a lot more before we can get there. Razorhurst was another huge surprise, pleasant surprise that we played on the channel. And maybe in terms of sort of surprise, I would put Rear Window up there. And then Icky, which is a competitive game that I play with my wife, I really love as well. So those are my top games from 2022. Jesse says, I put some questions here of my own. Which of your videos are criminally underwatched? Okay, so it's a good question. I'm glad you asked. I made a little list here. I was thinking I need to, if you're thinking of making a YouTube channel, one of the problems is that the earlier your videos, no one's ever going to watch them because people only want to watch what's new. And so unless you know what you're doing, your first year of videos isn't going to get much watch. So there's a bunch of videos that don't get watched. But there are a couple of videos that I really have very fond feelings towards. This one here is actually my whole 5-hour course on Micro Studio board game video production. I actually put those on Skillshare and Udemy too. If you're interested in making a YouTube channel, which I don't think you should, but if you are, maybe watch that. Okay, so here's a video that I really have very fond memories of and feelings for. How to be a good co-op teammate. These are sort of like most of the videos we do. You know, you do a review of a game. There are 20 reviews of that game on YouTube, maybe 30, 40. You know, everyone's saying the same thing. So why should you watch our video? But then there are a couple of videos that are just unique to this channel. And this is one of them. And I just feel really good about this video. And it's got, you know, timestamps all through it. It's an hour long. Well, we were both. And it's got, look at all these timestamps of different sections. We can't. Each one has got like a little thing down at the bottom that comes up.
Where the political divide in America.
Just, I thought, you know, I sort of prepared 40 or 50 slides. Anyway, it would be better. There's a video that I really wish that more people had seen because I like that. Greg had an idea. That would be a video to send to someone who's not playing cooperatively with you very well. Then I did a video called 3 ways to honor a board game friend who has died, based on some stuff I saw in Board Game Geek that really touched me. This is a short video, only 10 minutes long. Then I did a fun video talking about tips for playing these narrative mystery detective games. And then there were just a couple of videos I put up here because I found them interesting to do. One was the Adventures by Gaslight, because Adventures by Gaslight really blew me away how good it was and how interesting it was to think about what worked and what didn't. And then there's a couple of video series that I enjoyed because the game didn't quite work for me. So Dune House Secrets I did not like. But that made for an interesting discussion about, from game design, why didn't it work? And then I've just put the Postmortem LA trilogy. That's an interesting little review, but really I just put it here as representative of that set. Bureau of Investigation was a similar thing about a game that didn't quite work. So I spent 2 hours talking about why it didn't work, where it failed. And then I just listed a couple. There's the Razorhearst. These were basically games that were, there's nothing special about these videos. It's just that the games were surprisingly good and enjoyable. Vienna Connection, again, has this is an hour and 40 minutes, just talking about game design elements and why it worked and why it didn't. I threw in The Anniversary, the fan-made case by Martinez Conradi, whose new game we're playing tomorrow. This is one of my favorite Sherlock Holmes consulting detective cases. There's nothing special about this video, but the actual game was special. And then here's a representative discussion with Greg that I thought was a useful discussion. Okay, there you go. Some criminally underwatched videos. What else? Here's another question from me. What YouTube channels would you recommend? I try to recommend a couple channels each live stream, so let me do a couple here. Okay, first, I would be remiss in not recommending and pointing you to 2 of Greg's channels. Greg has started a new channel, mostly with his wife, reviewing movies, called Wachacha's Watch List. Here's his latest video with Jill, his wife, ranking top 10 vampire movies. And you can see I joined for 2 top 10s, top 10 love and romance, top 10 relationship movies. Not my favorite genre, but I've watched a lot of them. And I have some good recommendations here. But if you want to watch Greg's movie thoughts, you can check out this channel. There's a link to it in the About page on the Co-op for 2 YouTube channel. You'll find links to that. And then he started a new series called his Wargaming Journey. This is a little bit more up my philosophical alley, because he's sort of combining why he's interested in picking a war game and then sort of background on his life and choosing games, and then talks about how he's gone about choosing what war game to play, and some little talk about his father and growing up. So it's a nice sort of mix of philosophy and life, and then tying into his choice of board game. And Greg is very serious about these things. He's like, the way he describes the war game is like, I need something to pour dozens and dozens of solo hours in. So this is just a game he's going to play solo, which I don't, is something I don't have. I don't have the desire to play these kinds of games solo, but I think it's worth checking out. All right. What else? What other YouTube channels would I recommend? Okay, so I try to find channels which have less subscribers than this channel, which is very difficult. So here's one. There's a lot of channels doing should you back it stuff, and I tend to appreciate when I find someone who's sort of calm and not overly hyped about these things. I do like his channel. It's not just all should you back, but I like it. And I like how, like, let's see, can you hear when I play this? If I play this, can you hear him?
And should you back the Marvel United multiverse? No, I don't think you should.
So I like that. First of all, he speaks in a way that I'm happy to listen to, but he's also starting with the punchline. Should you back it? No. Anyway, I appreciate that. Okay. couple more. Here's Solo Adventures with Livy. I've mentioned this before because I learned of a couple games from her. She's not been posting that frequently recently. However, I believe that this was the video she did about Key Enigma calling card, which is, in fact, someone recently posted on here. This is where I discovered Key Enigma calling card, and someone has called me out here like, hey, are you ever going to play Chapter 3? And here I am trying to get Liv to play it. Because that was one of my worst experiences. This game right here, calling card Key Enigma, and we can talk about that. So we can talk about whether we should ever finish that. But nevertheless, I really like her channel. And she was actually the first person, the only other person I've seen who reviewed Razorhurst, which we loved and she loved as well. Okay, here's a channel that does not need anything from me with 34,000 subscribers, but Joel from Drive Through Review is another one of these channels that is really enjoyable just to listen to him talk about his ideas. He sort of can talk off the cuff.
Brimstone really kind of gets into the same,
but it's really quite
arena.
interesting to hear him go through his thoughts about games, why he likes them, why he doesn't.
There's something about how they kind of come together, how they're put together.
Sorry, I don't want to be talking over all these people. And then I did want to quickly mention three other websites very quickly that I've mentioned before but didn't have specific names to them. Here's Escape Room Adventure. This is my source for Deadbolt Mystery Society reviews because they have reviewed a lot of them. They like them all, but so you have to, and they get these games free, but they rate them, and some of them rate only a 6 and some of them rate them a 10. And all of their recommendations, when they say this is a fantastic Deadbolt Mystery Society game, it has turned out to be true. So I have a lot of respect for their recommendations and their reviews. They review lots of other stuff as well, but this is my go-to Deadbolt Mystery Society game, and they've reviewed a lot of these Deadbolt Mystery Society games. And I hope they start up again, because the last one they did was in end of 2021. Then the other site that I want to plug for doing these kinds of things is Escape the Rumors. There are a lot of reviews on this website of all different kinds of mystery games, including some sort of rare ones. And I did want to call special attention to this article by Brent Price, because when I went looking for anyone else who had written about Fenton and Farr and these old 1938 games, I came across this article by Brent Price, who is talking a little bit about the history of these games. And you see he mentions here a little bit of early history, 1843, the Gold Bug story where there was a cipher, and here he is mentioning Baffle Book, Photo Crimes books. There's Dennis Wheatley's first case, and he's a couple more following Robert Prentice. This is another Dennis Wheatley game that we played. A couple more dossier books. There's your Fenton and Farr. So he goes into a little bit about the history of these games. And if you go to their review section, you can see that they've actually reviewed a lot of games on this channel, on this site, that would be of interest to people interested in these kinds of games. A lot of games that I'm quite a fan of. Puzzle games, but also some cooperative normal games. There's the Adventure Game series, the Exit series. Anyway, they've done a lot of reviews and they're quite good, so I would recommend them. And then the last one is, I've mentioned this Facebook group, Puzzle People. Don't be thrown off by this little banner image. They're actually some hardcore detective puzzle game people on that Facebook group, if you use Facebook. I don't really use Facebook, but if I did, that's where I would be hanging out. Okay. We are almost at the end here. Let's see if any more questions in the channel. Videos of yours, well, top 25 favorite case list for yours. Yes, I have to do another video of my top mystery games soon. All right, how about what are my least favorite games, or maybe a better way to say this is biggest disappointments of 2022. I think this is the last thing I have to say, then we'll just wrap this up. So I mentioned a couple already. Key Enigma calling card. That was pretty painful. I'm tempted to go back and keep sticking with it, but it was more like a video game than a puzzle tabletop game. And the last session, those games were driving me to drink. But there were a couple others that were disappointing for me. The biggest surprise was Decorum, which was my top pick from Gen Con of last year. I loved the experience. It was such a unique, novel experience. And then we started playing through a dozen games in its campaign, and by the end, I really disliked it. So for me, that's one of those games where the hype and the first experience was strong, but after that, I really grew to dislike it. All of the things I liked about the early games where you could really wrap your head around other people's goals and try to deduce what they were trying to do, by the time you got to the end, it was just busy work trying to keep track of your own goal. Then there are a couple games that weren't bad at all, that I really loved that they made, but were sort of disappointing to me. One was Bureau of Investigations into Arkham. It kind of missed. I loved the experimentation, but it kind of missed. And Mortem Medieval Detective fell into that same category of, I love that it was a detective mystery type game. I love that it tried new stuff. It just sort of didn't quite work for me. And then maybe I'll throw one more in there because everyone seems to love it, was Wonderland's War, which is a competitive game that a lot of people love. It would just left me a little bit flat. I'm not a big fan of the area control stuff, and everyone else I played loved it. It didn't really do anything for me. All right. I think that's it. So let's just quickly check in with the chat. We went 15 minutes over, not so bad. But I am going to talk a little bit about plans going forward, just for a minute or two, if there's no other questions in the chat, which it looks like there isn't. You still got a minute to stick in a new question. All right, so going forward, tomorrow, we'll play the fan case The Curse by Martinez Conradi at 11 p.m. On Sunday, 3 p.m. is our play-by-mail session. And then next week, we're going to play one of the Deadbolt Mystery Society games. If you want to go to the guild section on Board Game Geek and let me know which Deadbolt Mystery Society game you have interest in. But I do think I want to play Dark and Stormy Night or The Long Dark Night, one of those. As far as the channel, it'll just be more of the same that we've been doing. I'll still be doing my solo mystery games, and Greg and I will be doing more reviews and playthroughs of cooperative games. We've got a whole bunch of games queued up. I do want to focus more on fan-made cases for Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective and try to make a determined effort to really play a bunch of them so that we can speak more intelligently about that as a set. I have been posting on a thread in the guild about the detective game that I've been sort of working on. I've been getting a little bit more serious about that. I hope to spend more time talking about that, talking about some ideas, maybe doing a couple of book reviews about books that I found useful for that. And directly related to that is I think that I will try to do these live Q&A chats a little bit more frequently than once every 3 months. I'm slowly doing them more frequently. I think it's good just practice, and I think, we do more of them, we can focus more on some interesting topics and spend less time on sort of boilerplate catching up with statistics, and maybe we can keep them down under an hour if we do them more frequently. Robert says, going to a local board game convention this Saturday. Any recommendations on how to use time at the convention? No, I don't. The first conventions are the best, though. Just try to enjoy being around. You don't need any advice from me. You'll love it. It is very fun to be around people who are in their element, in their hobby, just focused on having fun, hanging out with like-minded people. It's a very fun experience just to be around that. Although I guess it depends on the convention. If it's small and unattended, then maybe it'll feel a little bad. Here's what I would say. Occasionally you get people posting somewhere saying like, I went into the game shop, no one wanted to play with me. Or, I'm alone, I don't have friends, I wish I could find someone to play games with. People at board game conventions especially, and in board game stores, are very, very friendly people. You're talking to your tribe, and you just have to get up the courage to talk to someone and say, can I join or whatever. There is no reason. You're with like-minded people. Everyone's a happy family at a board game convention. So you just jump right in there. If you're alone or a couple or whatever, and you're sitting there watching people play games, you don't know what to do, just jump in or start a game and ask if anyone wants to play. This is your opportunity to be, you're in a safe space to make friends. Hop says that they wrote some questions, but I might have missed them. I'll have to catch up on them next time. Do feel free to post. If we're going to do these regularly, you can post on the Board Game Geek Guild any questions you might have ahead of time. It's easier for me to queue them up ahead of time. Robert says, just discovered. Oops, it's not loading it now. Robert says, just discovered the singing detective Philip Marlowe-like mystery of 1946-part BBC mystery, now on YouTube as one 6-hour-long video. That sounds quite interesting. Okay. All right, we should wrap it up here. Thank you for having patience with me. We'll get better at these things as we go. If you have any other questions I haven't answered, please feel free to post them on the guild, and or join the Discord, and we'll get to them next time. Anyone who wants to join us tomorrow for our playthrough of The Curse, a Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective fan expansion, we'd be happy to have you there. Or Sunday for our play by mail. I'll see you next time.